What's up everybody, it's Brenton Brown from Forza Tuning and Performance, and I'm going to do a video about a topic we get asked a ton of questions about. And this is CatchCans crankcase breather system. So I'm gonna go over a little bit about why we use these, when you should and should not use them, or whatever. Just try to give some general information. It seems like a topic a lot of people have a lot of questions over. So, crankcase ventilation. This has been around on cars from 50s, 60s, probably before that. Anything with a PCV valve. And basically, all this is a way to evacuate crankcase gases. I'm just gonna use this Hellcat here as a general model, but it's the same basic principle on all engines, okay? It's just laid out a little bit different. I'm gonna cover, first of all, crankcase ventilation and what that is. So on any car, basically you're going to have a clean side and a dirty side, okay? And I'll explain this. On the Hellcat, the driver's side is the clean side. And what I mean by that is clean air is going into the valve cover, okay? And so if you're not sure what style or what side is what, it's real easy. Wherever your air cleaner is, you're gonna have a hose. And so this is a newer Hellcat, so it's a little bit different system, but bear with me. We have a hose right here that's in this intake track. And it comes down, it goes through this valve, this is just on the newer cars. And this is just to monitor flow, so it's not important. Most cars, you won't have a valve. And this goes into normally the rear of the valve cover, okay? On the earlier model Hellcats, same thing, went from this tube to the front of the valve cover. Doesn't matter, it's the same basic thing. It's clean air coming through the air filter, and it's going into the driver's side valve cover, okay? So that's why it's the clean side. Where it goes from the valve cover is it goes down through the crankcase. Okay, so that's down where the crankshaft is, the connecting rods, underneath the pistons. When an engine's running, okay, no engine operates at 100% efficiency. So whether the engine has some wear on it or forced induction or a new, variety of different things, you get blow-by gases. And what that is it's very simple. When the piston is coming up on a compression stroke and the spark plug ignites, the mixture explodes and forces the piston back down. The piston rings are what seals around the piston and around the cylinder wall. Some of the gases are going to escape past the piston rings. Okay, so they're going to go down and they're going to end up in the crankcase. Underneath the piston is where the crankshaft and the connecting rods are. So that's going to be mixed with a little bit of, it could be, fuel from the unburnt fuel or whatnot, but mainly we have air. On a forced induction vehicle, there's going to be more blow-by gases because the cylinders are under much more pressure because of boost. As the engine gets more wear, more mileage on it, there's going to be, the tolerances are going to get looser. So the cylinders are going to have less compression because the rings are wearing, the cylinder walls aren't going to be perfect anymore, so you're going to get more blow-by gases. So more combustion gases going into the crankcase, okay? So we have to have a way to get those out, and we don't want them to build up. On this engine, they will exit through this valve cover, okay? So we have to do something with them. We can't just take them and throw them out in the atmosphere because of the EPA and all that other stuff. So right here on the front of the valve cover, on this engine, it doesn't matter, it's somewhere on the valve cover, it's gonna exit. And it's gonna be reintroduced into the engine to be burned, okay? So on a Hellcat, you're gonna have a hose right here. It's gonna go onto the valve cover right here, and it's gonna go into the supercharger right here. If you had a naturally aspirated vehicle, it would come out one of the valve covers and go into the intake manifold. So the blow-by gases would go back in and get reburned through the engine. Okay, so the idea is to have a second chance to reburn the fuel in the air and stuff and kind of clean it up. A couple problems with that. Since the crankshaft is down there spinning, there's a lot of oil getting sloshed around in there. So there's going to be some oil molecules and oil vapor that are going to get mixed in with this gas. So it's going to be introducing those oil molecules back into the supercharger or the intake manifold and whatnot. You don't want that because that's going to leave a nasty residue in the intake, and oil has virtually no octane. Okay, so you do not want to inject oil into your intake charge. It can promote spark knock, detonation, so on and so forth. So an engine like the Hellcat engine, as far as crankcase ventilation, it's pretty good. So the crankcase does not build up with excessive pressure. On some other cars, especially all the GM, like the LT stuff, The crankcase ventilation is not good. So if you basically put forced induction on there and have any more blow-by gases than stock, what it can do is it can build up pressure in the crankcase, and you can literally like push the front and rear seal out of the engine, okay? And it's force being pushed up on the back sides of the pistons. You don't want that. So on those engines, we have to make the crankcase ventilation system more efficient, let it flow more air out, okay? So we're kind of talking about two different things, but I'm gonna tie them in together. That's basically what's happening. This is the same on every engine, and this is why you want to do something about this. I'm going to show you an example of a normal catch can that you've probably seen. This is just one example. This is Billet Technologies, and I'm going to show you real quick how this works. This isn't bad, okay? It's not that this is like it does serve a function. Now Billet Technologies, this style that they make. They actually have basically some filter media up in this top portion right here, some coalescent. And so basically the idea is they make it, it's very easy to install. It's gonna help, okay? And on a forced induction vehicle, I think that a catch can is an important thing to keep the oil out, because we know that forced induction engines are gonna have a tendency to have excessive blow-by gases or more than normal. So this kind of mounts right here, and basically all they do is eliminate this hose. So instead of going from the valve cover straight back into the supercharger, you're gonna take this hose out, and you're gonna take a hose from the valve cover going into one side and another hose from this side going into the supercharger. So the idea is as air passes through this, the air is gonna pass through this coalescent. It's kind of like some steel wool type material for, basically, and what that does is it traps oil molecules. So it lets the air go through, it traps the oil molecules, the oil runs down to the bottom of the can. Every once in a while you can unscrew this, drain it, put it back in, and all the oil that you see in this can would have been reintroduced back into your intake charger. It's gonna rob your car of power, and it could make it potentially dangerous because you don't want oil, it's gonna cause detonation. So if you want a simple solution and something that is, you have a car like this where you don't have a crankcase ventilation problem, you can use something like this. The system we have is a little bit different. I'm going to explain it and what it's doing. Now that we kind of understand crankcase ventilation, what it is, where the gases are coming from, why we don't want them in the engine, a catch can is basically exactly what the word says. It catches oil contamination and traps it in the can and basically cleans it out a little bit before it goes back into the engine. What we have is a catch can / crankcase ventilation system, okay? So right now we have it installed on this car, so I'm just gonna explain how it works, okay? Right now on the clean side, we have the same hose and we have it going through, and instead of going into the valve cover, what we have is we have it going through this cap where the oil fill cap is, okay? And this is a clean side separator. I'm gonna touch base on this in a minute, okay? So we're still going into the valve cover, okay? Just with a basic attachment here before it goes straight in. So we'll focus on that in a minute. Let me go over to the other side. Here is where the dirty gas is going to exit the valve cover, okay? So normally, here's what it is stock. It's going straight through here and everything's going right back into the supercharger. This catch can, we already explained exactly what it does. It's gonna catch some of the oil, okay? What we do, here is one of our cans, okay? And I just have this off the car. We're not gonna get a crazy explanation, but it's mounted down here so you can't see it real well. So we have a hose that basically comes from this valve cover and it goes to the middle port on the can, okay? And inside here, it's fairly similar to this. It's a much larger can, so we remote mount it. There's much more filter media in here. But the same basic concept is we're going to trap the oil and it's going to run down to the can. We put a check valve on here. You can lift it up and drain it and so on and so forth. What we do from here is we have the side ports, okay? And this is where the air is going to come back out of the can after it's been filtered, okay? So we have two hoses on here. One hose is going to go to the exact same location as this hose did and the hose coming off here, okay? And we are going to have a check valve in our hose. That way, there's no possible way that air can go the other way, okay? So that's one feature that I think should be there, and you just don't have the real estate or it's not involved in one of these kits. One side port is going to have a check valve, and it's going to come right back into the supercharger. So same thing, we are at this point using this as a catch can, just a much more efficient design than this, bigger, remote mounted, so on and so forth. You'll notice we have another line coming off here, okay, and I'm going to talk about it. So here it is, and it also has a check valve, same purpose as the other check valve. So we're going to come, and it's going to come right back into the intake track, okay. So the main purpose of this hose is to help increase crankcase ventilation efficiency. Okay, so right here is our throttle body. Okay, so if an engine is idling, it's under a lot of vacuum. Okay, that means it's sucking a lot of air out of this tank. That's really good. So when you're just part throttle cruising, you have a lot of engine vacuum. There's a lot of air. It's being very efficiently sucked through this can and reintroduced back into the intake. When your engine is at wide open throttle, okay, you're flooring it. If you had a vacuum gauge hooked up to it, you would have no engine vacuum. And in a case like this, you actually have boost, you have pressure, okay? When you're at wide open throttle, this is when you're gonna be at high RPM, the engine's gonna be under the hardest load. This is when you're gonna really want to be able to evacuate those crankcase gases as quickly as possible, okay? And this goes into more, instead of catch can, we are crankcase ventilation, okay? We do not want any positive pressure in the crankcase. By running this line from here into the intake track, think about this under wide open throttle. We have the throttle body right here, so the blade's wide open, okay? So we have a ton of air getting pulled through the air filter, through the throttle body, and into the supercharger. So there's a very strong Venturi effect of air coming through this tube, okay? So just like siphoning gas, with this large amount of air coming through this tube, this is actually sucking a lot of air out of this hose right here. The hose that we have down here, there's not as much because we don't have the same vacuum effect. So we still have some, but now you have two different ways to evacuate the crankcase gases. Okay, so we've drastically improved crankcase ventilation doing it this way. So that's basically the entire side. It's not that confusing, okay? The last thing I'm gonna touch on is the piece over here. And I called it a clean side separator. And so what this is very similar design to what's in the top of here. Inside this can is basically, we can flow more air through here as far as than what we can in the valve cover. So now we're increasing the amount of air that we can pull in through the clean side. More importantly, this has a coalescent material in here, same exact concept of this to trap oil. So if we ever got to a point where at wide open throttle, we were, super high RPM, a lot of boost, we just had a lot of excessive crankcase pressure for some reason, and it actually backed up. So the crankcase was able to temporarily be pressurized. Then what it could do, it could possibly back up and come out of both sides. So since this is normally the clean side, the clean's getting pulled in, the dirty's out there. If for some reason the amount of crankcase gases surpassed what that could exit, and it was happened to come up through this way, by setting it up like this, the air would come up this tube, okay, and it would have oil molecules and stuff with it, but now it has to pass through this coalescent material, which is going to trap any oil vapors, and the air would come back through, be reintroduced into the intake tube. So even if that happened, which it wouldn't on this, but say some crazy scenario, it would be physically impossible for any oil molecules to be able to enter the intake charge. Okay, so that's what that is. So essentially that thing is the same design as this. It's just now you have this on both sides of the crankcase ventilation system. If you're looking on the market, we do not sell our catch cans except for the cars that we build, strictly because we have a very hard time keeping up with demand just on the cars that we're building packages on. So that's why we get a lot of questions. No, I don't sell them, and I don't really have any plan in the near future to be able to do that. If you're looking on the market for an alternative, this one's not bad, Billet Technologies. The main thing you want to look at is this just an empty can? I've seen some of these that literally it's nothing but an empty can. You might as well put a beer can with a hose coming out each side. It's literally not doing shit. If you have some coalescent, a filter material, then you are going to get some oil in this can, and whatever oil you see in here is what's not being introduced into the engine. That's a good thing. Most applications, this is adequate, especially on the Hemi platforms. They don't have the same problem as the GM vehicles where they have a hard time evacuating the excessive crankcase gases. If it's a naturally aspirated car, well, let me start with this. A catch can is not ever going to hurt anything. So even a piece of shit catch can, it might not do anything, but it's not gonna really hurt anything except maybe the money you spend on it, your wallet. As far as needing a catch can, if you've got a naturally aspirated car, especially a new car, you're probably not really gonna benefit a whole lot off a catch can because number one, you don't have forced induction. You've got a new engine with tight tolerances, so you're not gonna have excessive crankcase gases escaping, past the rings and getting into the intake charge. If you've got a higher mileage engine, yes, it's gonna trap the excessive crankcase gases and oil molecules, but the engine's wore out. So I'm not sure how, effective it's gonna be at that point anyway. If you have like a GM vehicle and you're gonna use forced induction, yes, it is a must, and you need to get something, not just a catch can, you need to get something that is going to improve the efficiency of the crankcase ventilation system. The last thing that I want to touch on is another application where it's super beneficial is on a direct injection engine, okay, which a lot of stuff is going to. A direct injection engine is basically does not have a port fuel injection. It injects the fuel directly into the combustion chamber, which is highly efficient. The only downside to that is the intake track and the backside of the intake valves tend to get caked up with oil molecules. And that's because, for two reasons. Because of this exact same thing that we're talking about, and the lack of port injectors. So on an engine like this, the fuel is sprayed on top of the intake valve, and it actually helps clean the backside of the valve. On a direct injection engine, you don't have that. The fuel is injected directly into the combustion chamber. So you get oil, you get coking and everything on the backside of the valve. So a big problem, and now a lot of auto manufacturers are actually starting to have direct injection and then add port injectors specifically to clean the backside of the valves and resolve this problem. Now, one of probably the best thing that you can do on a direct injection engine, whether it be naturally aspirated or forced induction, is put a very high quality catch can or crankcase ventilation system, whatever you might be, mostly catch can. And what you'll do is the dirty air will come and the oil will get filtered out of it before it gets reintroduced into the intake track and on down to the intake valves, which is the main problem. So if you have any of the new direct injection stuff, you could really benefit by putting a good quality system on your car and preventing that, and that would save you some trouble, down the road for sure. So I think that wraps it up as far as catch cans, crankcase ventilation, how it works. Like I said, this is on a Hellcat, but every engine's the same. It's very easy to kind of just look at the way the hoses are routed. Wherever your air filter is, that's gonna be the clean side. Look for whatever side of the engine it goes to. The other side's gonna be the dirty side. So if you have any questions that I didn't cover, just leave them in the comments. Hopefully I got it all, and hopefully these videos help you guys out. If there's something else you wanna know about, by far I'm not an expert at anything, but I do have a pretty decent concept of a lot of things. So if you leave them in the comments, that helps the guys decide what kind of stuff you all want to see. And if it's anything that I feel like I can contribute, I'll be more than happy to do a video on it. So thanks for everybody for subscribing. And if you like this video, hit the like button. If you haven't subscribed, you want to see more, subscribe, and then see you guys next time.